Preparing to live stream. Setting up the meeting. Redirecting, and we are live.
We are live. All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the March 26th meeting of the Environment Subcommittee. We do have several bills to consider. This is the order in which we're going to take them. First, we're going to consider the two coal combustion bills. That's Delga Layman's HB 902 and SB 425. Then we will move on to the two bills that deal with cancer screening. And let's see, those are SB 849 and HB 757. Then we'll move to SB 253, dealing with chemical warfare material requirements, permitting. Then we will go to my bill, House Bill 1556, dealing with clean cars. And last but not least, House Bill 973, Delegate Boafo's bill on building performance standards. So with that, Kristen, could we move to the first bill? And I guess with respect to coal combustion byproducts, it's the Senate bill that has come over with amendments that we're considering. Is that right?
Well, if we talk about the Senate bill first, you're talking about the Senate bill third reader version. And
Sure.
so it is changed from the cross-filed, but the
Right.
bill itself does not have amendments.
Oh, it does not have amendment. Okay.
No, so it was amended in the Senate.
Amended in the Senate.
So we
Okay.
have the third reader version, and that's what we went over that last week. Would you like it up on the
Okay.
screen?
Yeah, why
Or
don't you bring it up on the screen? That's right. No amendments since we last saw it.
so I'm bringing up the third reader version that
Okay.
came over from the Senate. And so the bill had set a floor on the coal combustion byproduct fee, and so that the Senate bill took that language out. And so what the bill is doing, it's altering the factors that MDE must consider when establishing and collecting the coal combustion byproduct fee to include stored volumes of CCBs.
All right. Okay, and I guess we actually heard this bill today in committee. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Delga Layman, I know you have the cross file, and you talked a little bit about it at our last meeting. Anything you want to add before we entertain to? So first, we'll take up the Senate bill as it's presented to us, and then we'll consider motions to conform your bill to the Senate bill. Delga Layman, anything you'd like to add or comment on?
No, not really, Mr. Chair. I think I said at our last meeting that we had, in working with MDE, sent all of the language over to the Senate when it didn't look like, we wanted the bills to conform anyway. We didn't know what would happen before crossover. And as it happened, it was the Senate bill that made it across. But it reflects all the changes that had been agreed to between both my office and MDE and Senator Jackson's office and MDE. And I don't believe, Kristen, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there were any additional changes by the Senate, I don't think, on the floor. I know it was laid over at one point and there were some questions by the minority party, but then nothing was changed further in the bill before final passage.
Right. I mean, I can look up the history because I do just have the third reader version, but I'm not aware of any floor amendments.
Okay. All right, let's see. Do any subcommittee members have any questions? Let me see.
I
Yeah, Delegate Foley,
I don't have a question. I'd like to move the Senate bill, what is it, 245
425, yeah.
or 25?
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, Delegate Morgan, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you very much. I just was wondering, I might have asked this question last time, I don't remember, got getting too many bills. Do any other states have programs like this with those kind of fees?
Yes, multiple states do, but when I started out with this bill last year, we were trying to model it after, initially with drafting, we began by not modeling it after North Carolina, and then it became clear that North Carolina's law was even more complex, and it had other factors that, we don't have here in Maryland, but we ended up modeling it instead after Virginia. So I know for sure Virginia and North Carolina have very, very similar, and some of the advocates would argue more stringent laws actually than the one we're proposing.
Are they priced the same way?
Are they what?
The fee, is it the fee priced the same way?
So my bill does not have a fee in it anymore. The fee was struck completely, and the reason for that is Delegate Morgan and I struck it. I actually thought the fee should be increased because of years and years and years worth of this coal ash, waste that we're left to deal with. But MDE persuaded me that they can't bring in more money than they can spend. And, with fewer active coal-fired power plants, they just can't really grow the program at this point. And they had their own fee bill. They had a fee bill last year that we considered and passed because the fee was like going away, and they needed to renew it. And so they had a fee bill last year that the House passed, but the Senate never passed. And it was a comprehensive, it was a fee bill with a bunch of fees,
Right.
not just the coal ash fee, but it didn't pass the Senate. So they had to come back this year again with another fee bill. So it's the agency, the Moore administration with a bunch of, fees together, not as big a bill as last year, but that bill had already passed the Senate separately by the time Senator Jackson's bill was being heard. But this bill in front of us, both the Senate bill and the House bill have no fees in it now at all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so the Senate bill has been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
No. Okay, bill passes. Motion to conform House Bill 902 to SB 425.
So moved.
Second? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No,
Okay, all right, bill passes as amended to conform to SB 425. Okay, thank you. Let's move on to SB 849. Kristen, could you pull that up?
I am sorry. I'm
No
not
problem.
fast at this. Okay, so this relates to funding in the Professional and Volunteer Firefighter Innovative Cancer Screening Technologies Program. The bill, as introduced in the House bill, had changed the minimum funding from $500,000 to at least $3 million. We did talk to appropriations about this bill, and it was suggested we have an amendment to change this to the amount to $1 million. And then the bill is authorizing the program, up to 20% of the program funds to support research centers in the collection, analysis, and processing of program outcome data for the purposes of assessing, maximizing, and improving the effectiveness and clinical utility of the cancer screening funded under the program.
Okay.
So this bill has an amendment. It came from the Senate, with its own changes from the Senate, but there is an amendment being proposed on this bill to change the funding level from the discretionary funding from $3 million to $1 million.
Okay, so that is the amendment to the bill as it passed the Senate.
Correct.
Okay. Questions, Delegate Otto?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. where's this money coming from? Is it this general fund?
Right, it's a discretionary, you know, it's a may.
It's a shall not may.
It's a may,
Okay.
they include in the budget bill.
Uh, and it says substantial. How did it change from the House version that we discussed?
So the House version, the committee didn't move the bill. And so the difference is, we didn't move the bill. The bills, I think, were very similar. There might have been some technical differences, but they both had come in with increasing that discretionary funding from 500,000 to 3 million. And the difference there here from what came over from the Senate is that there's an amendment to change that funding amount again to instead be at $1 million. The discretionary funding.
You had talked about 500,000 and
That's current law, correct? And the budget, I think in the past 2 years, it's introduced in with $400,000 for the program.
all right, and where's this additional money going to?
Well, I think it's the money is for the program to support the screening that's provided to firefighters.
Yeah, that's substantial for the number of firefighters we have to take a blood test or whatever. All right, thank you.
Okay, Delegate Foley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do we know, is this money being, is the money in this year's budget? I know it's discretionary, but is it in this year's budget? Do we know?
The funding level that's provided in this year's which was in the budget as introduced was at $400,000.
Oh, okay, you just said that. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Otto, do you have another question? Yeah, are you good? Okay. All right, so we have an amendment before us to Senate Bill 849.
Move the amendment.
Mr. Chair.
Okay,
Second.
it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, bill as amended. Is there a
Move the bill's
motion?
amended.
Second.
All right, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, bill as amended passes. Now, let's see, we do the the House cross file is House Bill 757. Is there a motion to conform House Bill 757 to SB 849 as we amended it?
Move the bill to
Okay.
conform.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. House Bill 757 passes as amended. Okay, let's move on now to SB 253. Kristen, could you review where we are on this? And this we heard today.
Right, this is a bill we heard today. The bill that provides an exemption from existing restrictions that apply to the incineration of chemical warfare materials when the incineration is done under an R&D permit. And then the bill sets out additional requirements for those activities. Delegate Healy has worked on an amendment to include additional requirements that models current law relating to emergency preparedness. There has been an additional suggestion on that language from the department. So I believe, I know the Department of the Environment and Commerce both, I think, are comfortable with this proposal. I haven't been able to share it with Delegate Healy because we've just been sharing emails right before this meeting started. So I don't know if you want to look at any language, if, how does the subcommittee want to proceed? Did you want to see Delegate Healy's language? Do you want to see the substitute language?
Why don't you bring up Delegate Healy's language? And I'm sorry, Kristen, the substitute language that is confirmed at this point or still in process?
So I think hopefully we have folks from Department of the Environment and Commerce on, and at the last check of my emails, it looked like the language that was proposed by, that was suggested by MDE, that they were comfortable with it.
Mhm.
That's my understanding. Oh wait, I didn't,
Okay.
hear. I'm sorry. So,
No, that's fine.
yeah, so the language that came from Delegate Healy was modeled after the requirements that are under existing law and relating to emergency preparedness. So she just wanted to bring those requirements into this, to apply to these activities that are permitted under the RD&D permit. And then I can show you how the department, I think they felt that, to model or use the language from existing law may be overly burdensome for the process. And so they had alternative language that does cross-reference these provisions, but in a way that gives some flexibility into how they're applied. And I can bring those up if you want to see the language.
Sure. But remind me, Delegate Healy hasn't had a chance to.
I have
see
not
the
had,
language.
no. I know Delegate
Yeah.
Healy has been in discussion, with at least the Department of Environment and Concept, but I'm not sure where she is with their suggested language.
Okay, well, why don't you bring up the substitute language, and while you're doing that, I know Bryson, you had reached out, you said you wanted to comment on the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the subcommittee, Bryson Popham, representing the Army Alliance, one of the proponents of this bill, and also Jennifer Lahat from Commerce is on here, and she can certainly share with the committee the process that has taken place just since the committee hearing ended a couple of hours ago. We've been quite busy after the colloquy in that committee hearing between Secretary Coker and Delegate Healy. Respectfully to Delegate Healy, I wish to remind the subcommittee that the need for the bill and the language of the bill reflects the current realities of the activity that is taking place at APG in the CBC lab. What do I mean by that? I mean that when those provisions to which Delegate Healy referred were originally enacted, we were in a very different place. We were destroying large quantities of existing chemical weapons, largely mustard gas at that time. Today, it's completely different. The quantities, the materials are quite different. We don't know what they are, and that's one of the things the lab at Aberdeen Proving Ground is tasked with doing. They have to analyze it, and they have to prepare countermeasures for our people in the fields. These are small amounts of material. They operate under, the lab operates under an international treaty that limits the total amount of materials for testing at 1 metric ton. But in many cases, it's just a matter of a few pounds that they have. So it's not anywhere close to large amounts of materials that are destroyed, which could create a potential hazard for citizens surrounding the post. So we think that should be taken into account. And while we certainly respect Delegate Healy's desire for effective, what she called an emergency preparedness plan and what the Secretary called a contingency plan, we are confident that we'll be able to reach an agreement on language that will accommodate her concerns and also reflect the realities of what's going on at APG right now. And with your permission, Mr. Chairman, I see a couple of hands up. I guess those are questions for me. I would like to call upon Ms. Lahat in case I need some help with these questions.
Sure, that'd be fine. Okay, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's hard to figure out what we have here. So this says required emergency preparedness plan. that's appropriate to the size and scope of the activities included in the permit. Fair enough. But what I don't know is, what are these sites compared to Delegate Healy's amendment, which I actually think is pretty good. But one of the things that I'm most concerned about is that that the local governing body of each county and municipal corporation, this is in Delegate Healy's amendment, included in the worst case release, has a reasonable opportunity to review and provide comment on the permit application and emergency preparedness plan. My guess is that's probably not in there.
Well,
And I think that it's really important. This was brought up in the hearing by, I believe, Delegate Naraki. The secretary indicated that they would be talking to Baltimore County. So I think it's really important that these emergency preparedness plans be shared with the local jurisdictions. And I can't tell from this language if that's still in there.
I appreciate your comment, and I'm going to have to put you off to Ms. Lahat, who has been drafting language on that very point today, Delegate Foley, if you'll permit me to do so.
Sure.
Sure, Jen, do you want to chime in?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Foley. So the sections that are cited in the language here, they do not specifically include that local jurisdiction section of the existing language, but they do include the public participation portion of the creation of an emergency preparedness plan. So our position is that the requirement that there be ability for local participation in the preparation of that plan covers the requirement to allow the local jurisdictions to review and comment, because there will be the participation process.
So is that the public meeting provision?
Let me pull up, sorry, I've got the bill in front of me, so I'll look at it while I've got it.
And I'm looking at Delegate Healy's amendment, and she has a number 3, the emergency preparedness plan, which you're calling something else, and that's okay, has been presented at public meetings in each county potentially impacted by a worst case release.
And yeah, and you're correct. That's not in that wasn't mentioned in the language that I brought up. I just brought up Delegate Healy's since that has the more specific details of what's in.
So that's the part.
Yeah.
3, and then Roman numeral 2. Yeah, I'm concerned that as Delegate Naraki pointed out, there needs to be local consultation on this too, and in particular the emergency preparedness plan. I think they need to be made aware of it, and that would give people a comfort level. So that's what I'm asking. Are we talking about number 3 there on Delegate Healy's amendment?
I think the B or 3 I think it's the last one. It's double I. I think that's the one that was not cross-referenced. I'm not sure if that was intentional. I know we were having some back and forth with I was having back and forth with the department. I don't think it was intentional to leave it out. I'm not sure though. I guess maybe Jen, remind me. I'm not sure that was something that maybe you guys thought needed to be in there or not.
We felt that it was covered by I guess the 3 right above it.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Right. So we felt as though that piece was covered. So it is not currently included in the alternative language that we have proposed, but I'm happy to have more conversations with Bryson and his client on how they feel about specifically including the local governing body language. I think our feeling and in the conversations that we have had with them is that, again, the scope of these situations is not the same scope that was contemplated when that language about the governing bodies was adopted. But I would also think that the language that we had proposed as the alternative that MDE worked on drafting has that kind of catch-all to cover that the plan be created
that
at an
was-
appropriate.
Yeah, that's my question. So this number 3 that says the emergency preparedness plan has been presented at a public meeting in each county potentially impacted by a worst case release. That is in those statutes, parts of statutes that are cited in the amendment from the department. Is that correct?
Right, that's item 6 that was in the language.
Okay. All right, that's what I'm asking. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Delegate Foley. Delegate Ruth, before calling you, I just want to say to the subcommittee, we really have two options with respect to this bill. We're going to meet again, the subcommittee will meet again probably Friday. So if we're not, given all the discussions that are taking place about the amended language, we can defer until then if the subcommittee would like. Alternatively, the chair said that we could approve this amendment or either of these amendments with the idea that we would tweak it before it comes to the full committee for a final vote, with the tweaking to reflect sort of any final meeting of the minds. So well, folks, think about that, and now I'll call on Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first, I admit I'm a little confused about Delegate Foley's conversation there and what the resolution of that was. Is the resolution that the alternative amendment proposed by the, whatever it is, the Alliance and Commerce, whether that covers the local communication with the local governing body? With that back and forth, I'm sorry, I got confused.
Chair Stein, if I just point out that it's for this new paragraph 3I, 1, 2, and 3, that's what's included. So that portion of Delegate Healy's amendment is being cross-referenced. And so number 3 relates to public meetings, but it doesn't have the language that's under 3 2 subparagraph 2.
Thank you. And so it's being referenced in another part of statute, I guess, or is it?
Actually, yeah, I'll go to that part of current law. And because the current law provides additional requirements that would have applied to the incineration of those large stockpiles of chemical weapons if that were to happen. And so this bill is exempting these research activities from those requirements under our D&D permit under the bill. And so the current law had various additional requirements that apply to the incineration of those weapons. And so we have here where it's been renumbered by amendment. So in lines lines so 8 through 11, that's and then 12 through 15, and then 16 and 17. So that language was being modeled in Delegate Healy's amendment to go into the requirements for the RD&D permit.
Thank you. I understand now. But my question that I raised my hand for is more like a general question for I guess Jen or Brian, whichever, or both. Which is, I understand that it's a different situation and we're talking about much smaller quantities than when this law was passed originally. But I don't understand what the harm is with being a little more careful with this amendment. What, including some of these things like the coordination with the local government, that are not in your amendment. I mean, as you say, you may have chemicals that we don't know enough about. At least I think I understood that, because the point is research. So what is the harm of being a little more restrictive, a little more careful, I guess, is my question.
If I may, Jen, take a stab at that first. First of all, Delegate Ruth, thank you for the question. And I want to be clear with the subcommittee. The decision-making process from our side, that is, as we evaluate these different iterations of an amendment, it isn't just my client, the Army Alliance, it is the Army itself. They themselves are folks that we are, in other words, they're the ones that are going to be regulated by this law. So we are consulting with them as well. And you're absolutely right. There is no harm. What we're trying to do, and I think we began that process in the committee hearing today, is come to an agreement on what needs to be done. I heard comments there. I've heard comments here, and Jen has been working very hard this afternoon, and I think successfully moving in the direction that I've heard expressed in this subcommittee meeting. So I think we're getting there. I don't think we're there yet, but Jen, do you have a comment on that?
I would say that what we're trying to ensure is that the language that is included in a bill that is hopefully ultimately passed is not so burdensome that it is not able to be implemented. And so that's really why we wanted to ensure that that kind of catch-all language was in there to reflect that it's appropriate to the scope of the activities.
Got it.
And I think to that extent, if we're adding other pieces in there, then we can work through that. But that was our main concern, is ensuring that we have that flexibility, that the plan that's adopted is appropriate to the scope, and that they're not being required to over plan for a situation that is not likely to happen.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And
Sure.
Bryson,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I think I mangled your name
That's
before.
quite all right. Quite all right.
And I do want to say, I know a minute ago I said we had two options, but I'm going to suggest that we hold this bill. I know Delegates Otto and Morgan have their hands up, so we'll get to you in a second. But given the questions and the fact that conversations are still going on, and we'll be meeting no later than Friday again, I'm going to say let's hold this bill. But Delegate Otto, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a question. I was going to move the amendments.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. I would request that we hold the bill at this point.
Well, I'll respect your direction, so thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Otto. Okay. Delegate Morgan? Delegate Morgan, are you on mute?
No, I think if, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, if you guys are gonna hold off on this, I think that, I heard Delegate Narwaki's comment this morning where the Army doesn't reach out to him. Well, I can tell you, the Navy doesn't reach out to me either, so you sort of, and I live probably a lot closer, so I can see the Navy base out my back door window. I do think that what MDE and Commerce said today gave me greater assurances that they contingency operations plan, emergency preparedness plan is moving forward. I do know, I think as Bryson said, he represents the Army Alliance. And I think he has to be able to speak on their behalf, because you're not going to get a uniform to come down here, because it's big Army, and it's, I can tell you the protocol is extremely difficult. And I don't think anyone's ever seen a military uniform up here testifying in the House or the Senate on behalf of a bill. So I'm glad to see they're making progress. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get this thing off the dime sooner rather than later, and make sure that, those 1,200 jobs that could be at risk are going to be taken care of, and the satisfactory protocols that everyone's so worried about are in place. Like I said, working in the business I'm in, I have plenty of opportunity to watch this stuff and know that the Navy and the Army are very concerned about the populations that they have to live around, because let's not forget that those people who are working there also live there.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Delegate Morgan. Delegate Lehman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate your decision to hold off on adopting the amendments or the bill. I still have what I feel like is some conflicting information, and representative of the administration wondered, well, what would that be? Well, in various conversations in this subcommittee and one-on-one with some of these agency folks, it was for me personally, and I'm not saying this is intentional misinformation, but it's confusing where it was implied, that this material was all on site. Then it was going to be a mix of some on and some off sites, some on and some off site. And then, now it sounds like some of it could actually be coming from overseas. Also, I was told this treaty that everyone kept alluding to, which I now have a partial copy of it. It turns out that it's enormous and it's in multiple languages, but I have had at least some of it forwarded to me that I've been able to look at. And it's from 1992, so it's not that current. 1992 is not that recent, and I understand things are changing all the time. But for someone to have said that it was a World War II era treaty, more than one person told me that, which is wrong. But going back to my question today, because the answer was not clear to me on, there have for decades been four main types of chemical weapons: choking, blister, blood, and nerve agents. And then between the 70s and the 90s, the Soviet Union began developing what's called this fourth, sort of category or class, generation, I think is the term, of chemical weapons. And they're actually referred to as a proper noun called Novichoks. I don't know if that's how you say it. Are those or are those not going to be in the mix of what is going to be handled at Aberdeen? And, again, my concern is about, where that expertise on the permitting side. Granted, this is MDE permitting and saying you can do this, this, and this, but maybe not these other things. And here are these guardrails. But where is the, in-house, to the degree it even exists, in state government? It certainly doesn't exist in commerce. I think we can all agree on that, right? What is the closest we have to that at MDE? If somebody else is not available.
Can anyone help with that, Bryson?
Yep.
I was going to answer the question until you got to the end of it, Delegate. The only person I know of who can address the very specific questions you have asked is the person I alluded to earlier. He is with the United States Army. He runs the lab. He testified back in January on the House version of this bill. His name is Robert Malone. We have been in touch with him today, seeking his assistance. I know Jen has been back and forth seeking his assistance on language that we would propose to address Delegate Healy's issue. And I am happy to ask him, and I feel confident in saying he would agree. If you would like to speak to him and ask those questions, I can, I believe, arrange that. That's the only response I can give you to your several questions there.
Well, I would very much like to take you up on that, Mr. Popham. That would be much appreciated. I do want to return briefly to Delegate Ruth's question, which I didn't quite understand when you talked about, and these are my words, that there being this like uncertainty, this sort of gap between what Delegate Healy is after on emergency, preparedness, and what you are, not you personally, but the willingness to accommodate that, or where is that difference or that delta? What's the problem there? That's not clear to me the way you expressed it.
And Bryson, before you answer, and certainly please respond to Delegate Lehman, but after that, I'm going to wrap up the question since we are holding the bill. But Bryson, if you could put in the, well, actually, I don't know, if you're able to put things into the chat, could you, or maybe you can just tell us what your email address is so that people have additional follow-up questions can get in touch with you directly. Okay.
Can we just make that my answer? I'll give you my email address and we can pick this up. Or do you want me to try to answer your question?
Well, briefly.
Okay. If I understood the question correctly, it's what's different now about what the way it used to be. Is that your question, Delegate Lehman? Is that essentially it?
Well, that's a very big picture question generally about Aberdeen, but I am piecing that together through various sources. But no, I guess my last question was this issue with, I applaud Delegate Healy for thinking in terms of emergency readiness. But you made a comment when you were talking about trying to work with her through that you hope you could get there, you would try to get there, but you weren't there yet. What is that issue? Where's the concern or the difference?
Oh, okay, I'll be as direct as I can about that. The last amendment we saw, which I did not receive directly from Delegate Healy, but I was told that she was, the last communication, I would say, that was attributed to her was her review, and I believe Kristen was involved in this. Some of our language was presented to her and it did not satisfy her. So I don't know what exactly the nature of her objections were. But, I've been around long enough, and many of you have been around long enough, that legislation quite often finds its way into enactment through the amendment process. And I would consider this to be exactly that. We have to do a good job of giving you and your colleagues the facts necessary to make your judgments here and answer your questions, and we're doing our level best to do that. I hope you understand that.
Okay.
Once we've done that, then it becomes really a negotiating process. And we're being asked to do things. And the way I would answer your question is those processes that were established when that treaty first was enacted back in the 90s. By the way, I believe it was updated in 2005, but those were from a very different, materially different set of facts.
Yep.
And that means that everything about the bill we're doing this year, including the emergency preparedness plan, which I also applaud Delegate Healy for her attention to, is different. We have much smaller amounts of material. We will give. I'm volunteering Mr. Malone for this, so I hope he comes through for me to answer your questions about the types of material, so you can make an informed judgment on it. But it's not like to go back to a conversation I had with your chair this afternoon after the bill hearing. I said the process that's in place now that has been in Maryland law for these many years is, and I was exaggerating for effect, but I said it's to take care of a Fukushima type incident. In other words, a mass casualty incident. And your chair gave me, I thought, a very astute response. He said, well, I think my committee members are more worried about East Palestine, which of course was the train that tipped over in Ohio and caused a great deal of consternation and damage to public health at the same time. We're not talking about those quantities of materials. We're talking about much smaller quantities, and we haven't discussed at all really in detail the processes that are in place today that I think satisfy our MDE to ensure the safety of the local community. So I want to get you all the information, Delegate Lehman and members of the subcommittee, that you need to make your decision. I'm going to do my level best to do that. But I hope you understand me when I say we aren't there yet with a set of amendments that we can all agree on.
Thank you.
Okay, no, Bryson, and I'm sorry, Doug Lehman, didn't mean to cut you off, but
Yeah, no, thank you. I just, my final comment is, given that, as Mr. Popham said, that things have changed so much since the early 90s or even the early 2000s when this was last, amended or updated, that it returns me in my mind to my initial question was, then how can you continue to argue that Aberdeen Proving Ground is so uniquely positioned and the only facility that can handle something that wasn't contemplated in the 90s or even early 2000, 2005, when we're talking about completely different materials, different technologies. I just don't buy the argument. I'm skeptical, let's say, of the argument that Aberdeen Proving Ground and Aberdeen Proving Ground only is singularly the place that if this is going to happen, that it must happen. I'm very skeptical about that argument. And that's all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Bryson, why don't you tell, Bryson, no need to respond to that. Why don't you just tell us what your email address is for anyone who wants to follow up with you?
Okay. My email address is be like boy, Popham, Popham at papalaw.com. That's PAPALAW.com. And I must add, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I was just handed a piece of paper saying that Mr. Malone can have a discussion with any committee member tomorrow I guess at your convenience. So, we are doing our best to comply with your request for information.
Okay, all right, appreciate that. Delgado, you have your hand up. Did you have a very quick question or?
Yes, I still want to push my motion to approve the amendments.
All right. I'm sorry, Delgado. I'm gonna exercise the discretion of the chair and say we're gonna hold the bill. Okay, but
Well,
thank
I
you.
might have a second.
Well, okay. Well, at this point, I'm just gonna say we're holding the bill, but
All right,
thanks, Delgado.
fair enough.
All right, next bill. Let's see, that's HB 1556, my bill. The Advanced Clean Car and Clean Truck bill. Kristen, could you pull up the bill with the sponsor amendments? So since, I'm the sponsor, I'll just say, as introduced, this bill would have said that for model years 2027 and 2028, MDE could not enforce any penalties against manufacturers for non-compliance with the EV's sales targets for those years. This has no impact on those particular targets. And in fact, Delegate Ruth has asked whether I would be amenable to uncodified language that makes that completely clear. That is that this bill has no impact on the targets at all under either clean cars or clean trucks. And so I've said, yes, there wasn't time before the subcommittee meeting for that to be drafted. So before the actual committee vote, we'll have that drafted and added. But Kristen, if you could go over the amendments.
Sure. And so the amendments are making an exception to the prohibition that you just explained, and it would allow the department to impose penalties against a motor vehicle manufacturer for model years 2027 or 2028 for violations when the manufacturer has agreed, relative to the program.
Okay. Questions about the amendments? Delegate Foley.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
Me too.
Okay. What the amendments do, it basically says
Yeah,
that.
I mean, I don't understand why the requirement. I mean, that sounds like a circular thing. The requirements of the program. So tell me what we're talking about here. So what's in place now, and then what's changing, and what does the amendment change?
Sure. Maryland has opted into the Clean Car 2 and Clean Truck standards. And those specify a certain, depending on the model year, an increasing number of vehicles, be they, regular automobiles or vehicles considered to be trucks, that have to be provided by the manufacturers for sale within the state that are electric, that are zero emission. So basically, electric vehicle or a plug-in electric hybrid. So those standards kick in with for Maryland for model year 2027. The percentage that needs to be sold is 43%. There are some credits are available. There's debate as to what the percentage of credits are, but in my opinion, the manufacturers will not come close to meeting the sales requirements. And so as a result, the manufacturers have started telling Maryland dealers that if there is still the threat of enforcement penalties, that they will meet the standards by which, again, if you just look at sort of straight EV sales, we're not going to make it there based on straight EV sales if you have a normal sales year. So they're going to get to those standards by reducing the number of gas-powered vehicles, otherwise known as ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles, that they provide to dealers, which would be a significant cutback for dealers. Now, manufacturers have also told, and we heard testimony, during the briefing in January, that if there is no threat of penalties, then they will not withhold inventory from dealers beginning with model year 2027. So what this bill does, as originally introduced, says that MDE will not enforce any potential penalties that they could assess against manufacturers under either clean cars or clean trucks. Now, that will not mean that car dealerships will suddenly stop selling EVs. They have lots of EV inventory that they were trying to sell that they're on their lots. But what it means is they will not be subject to this potential reduction in inventory from the auto manufacturers, which would put a big dent in their sales in 2027 and not contribute to any other EVs being sold. So, okay, so that's the bill as introduced. What the amendments say is that since model year 2027 begins next fall. So we're saying if a manufacturer can come to agreement on implementation or enforcement penalties or adjusted targets between now and the start of 2026, then these penalties this waiver of penalties would not apply to that manufacturer. It could be a group of manufacturers that agree to it. It could be an individual manufacturer that agreed to it. And the same thing for model year 2028. We've broken it up into 2 separate years. So does that help?
Yes, and one more question. I actually have another question, but 2 questions, if I could. One
Okay.
is, so who do they reach an agreement with? MDE? Is that who they reach an agreement?
No, they can't. MDE doesn't have the authority to do that. It's either with California, the California Air Resource Board, or the federal government.
I see. Okay. So they have to reach the manufacturers have to reach an agreement with either one of those 2 entities.
That's right.
Okay. And then they get a waiver on the enforcement. Is that right?
No, if
They don't. It says
currently, if
reverse.
there's
It's
right, what the
reverse.
bill says with the amendment is that if there is not agreement, and there have been, my understanding, on again, off again discussions between manufacturers and CARB for at least a few years. If there isn't agreement, then there are no penalties for each of these years.
I
I
got
mean,
it.
first it applies to 1 year, there is an agreement the following year, then it applies to that second year. But again, I want to emphasize the targets do not change. So
Right.
this bill, in theory, could apply through model year 2028.
Right.
When model year 2029 kicks in, the increase in target in EV sales under each of these programs, clean cars and AC and clean trucks, will be there. We are not opting out of the program. We're not rolling back those targets.
Okay. Okay. That makes it, I understand now because they didn't reach an agreement. You're not going to enforce penalties on them. But my other question is, could MDE do this on its own? Could they
No.
decide? No, they cannot. They cannot decide not to enforce the penalty.
Well, they could, but they have said they have not assessed any penalties for noncompliance in the past, but there is no categorical commitment from MDE that they will not enforce penalties, hence this bill.
Okay, thank you.
Delgado. Charles, you're on mute. Charles? Need to,
We
there you
got
go.
you.
Okay.
I thought Kristen said something about intent of compliance. What does that mean? Who determines that? That was something
I
when
didn't,
she was describing the amendments.
maybe I was talking about the implementation or enforcement penalties that could be
Mhm.
applied, and maybe I just mumbled.
No,
I don't think I said anything other.
no, but I heard something about intent, and I wondered who determined what intent meant, but that was my concern. I think
Yeah,
this is a
Delgado.
move forward, but and I'm ready to support the amendments right now.
All right, thank you, Delgado. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate what we're trying to do with this bill, and I think we have no choice but to extend and go outwards. However, being a capitalist, I think we should realize that the market is going to drive, no pun intended, the decisions that individuals are going to make where they want to buy an EV or where they want to buy an internal combustion engine car. And you're not going to be able to just force them to do it because we have standards we want to meet as a legislative body, but the public may decide, I don't like that. And the concern I have is, you point out, Mr. Chair, there's 4 states around you can buy a car in, and the effect to the economy could be worse than what we're imagining because we're trying to sometimes put a square peg into a round hole. That's my
Okay,
2 cents.
okay. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait and see if anyone else had any questions and move the amendments.
Any further questions? Okay, seeing none. Delegate Allen, you're moving the amendments?
A second.
Second. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
Move the bill.
Okay, second. All right, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
And was there anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. The bill as amended passes. Thank you. Okay, next bill, let's see, House Bill 973.
I'll pull that up.
And for this, we're going to discuss it. This is the first time that we'll discuss in a subcommittee. And we'll sort of take the, want to take the temperature of the subcommittee as to how you feel about this, or whether you want to wait before considering any motion.
Quite frankly, I haven't had a chance to read the whole thing yet.
So House Bill 973 came in requiring the Maryland Building Performance Standards to be updated for new construction relating to fossil fuel use, energy conservation, and electric ready and solar ready standards. The bill has been amended extensively. It's going to, I'll get to the bill's requirements, but the requirements of the bill are limited to covered buildings, and covered buildings are buildings that would be subject to the requirements under BEPS. And so the standards must be adopted to require new covered buildings be electric ready, and that shall adopt amendments to model energy code credits, standard reference designs, and performance thresholds that establish that buildings of a certain fuel type may not be deemed compliant with the standards while achieving a lower energy efficiency on average than buildings of a different fuel type. And then the standards must also include regulations, essentially regulations that are intended to align with the requirements for existing buildings under BEPS. See, get to the section. So shall adopt provisions that require predicted annual net direct greenhouse gas emissions and site energy use intensity to satisfy the performance standards set under the BEPS standards for calendar year 2040. There's language added that the regulations shall make best efforts to align regulations impacting new construction with regulations adopted by the Department of the Environment regarding existing buildings. Again, that's intended to align with the requirements under BEPS. Additional language was also added to say that the section may not be construed to require a building to meet any requirements that are more stringent than the requirements under BEPS. And then there's language being added relating to the prospective application of these standards. And then the standards initially when they came in under the bill were to be adopted by October 1st, 2025, and the amendments delay that by 3 years to 2028.
Okay, thank you. I see several hands are up, but I just have a couple questions for you, Kristen. So again, the applicability of this is to new buildings that meet, I guess, the size threshold under BEPS. So buildings 35,000 square feet and larger. Is that right?
The large commercial multifamily housing and state buildings that are 35,000 square feet or more.
Okay. And at some point, maybe not right now, but I will ask any of the advocates who are in the call that can talk about the language in here that talks about, I think the phrase is de-biasing between systems. But before we get to that, I want to recognize people who have their hands up. Delegate Otto.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. You answered part of my question about the 35,000 square feet, but is that grocery stores? Is hospitals exempted from that? Where do we stand with this?
Yeah, that would be tied to the definition of covered buildings under BEPS. So yes to supermarkets, no to hospitals.
Yeah, so much for food deserts, huh? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Delegate Otto. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess broadly this is for Kristen, but so again, the basic idea here, right, is buildings that will need to be compliant under BEPS. If we're building them now, they should be able to comply with BEPS in the future. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Baylor.
I was going to move the amendments, but I see Delegate Foley has her hand up.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Yes, I have a question, Kristen, about on page 8 of the bill. Line 6.
I'll bring it back up. I just want to get to it faster.
That paragraph 3-2, 3-Roman 2.
Let me bring that back up though. Sorry.
Okay, so we put language in the BEPS bill that said that MDE with a local jurisdiction would evaluate whether or not local jurisdictions BEPS were as stringent as MDE's BEP, the statewide BEPS. And if they were, then the local jurisdiction BEPS would apply. And that implies that that's the floor. So you could actually end up in a local jurisdiction, I'm thinking of Montgomery County, of course, with requirements that were more stringent under the language that we adopted in the BEPS bill. And now it's saying that new buildings would not have to comply with those. It seems to be, could be in conflict, is my point.
Yeah, I don't have a quick answer for that. I think this is, these are the requirements that are being placed on the buildings that are, the larger buildings that are being newly constructed. And then I'm not sure I understand the question enough to give an answer yet.
So let's say you remember we put in the BEPS bill that if a local jurisdiction had a BEPS program, that MDE would examine that program and decide whether or not it was at least as stringent as what MDE had in place statewide, right?
For BEPS, right?
Right, okay. So what I'm saying is that that's the minimum. And what if a local jurisdiction had, it was more stringent, then the new buildings would be exempted. So it has to be at least as stringent. That means that it's at least as stringent or more stringent. If it's more stringent, then this says that new buildings, that it doesn't apply. Whereas it could be in effect under the BEPS language we adopted. So
I'm just, way I read this is that the local jurisdiction may adopt energy conservation requirements for buildings that are more stringent than the requirements established by the Department of Labor under the standards. And then it says,
oh, wait a minute.
I think it's meeting the more stringent standards, so.
I think it is. I'm sorry. After all that, I think I misread that. So
Okay,
I
good.
withdraw my question. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay, no problem. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I apologize. I'm trying to multitask if this already got asked. This language, I'm having like flashbacks to various electric vehicle charging bills. But what does the term electric ready mean exactly? And is that is that sort of a compromise? Is that the standard that advocates were actually going for? Or is that some in between, acceptability sort of level for maybe what they would have liked? What is electric ready?
Yeah, I see Aaron Sherman is on the call, and I know you helped with the amendments. Do you mind if I ask you to weigh in?
Sure, thank you.
Whoever can answer the question, Mr. Chair, I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. Aaron Sherman, RMI. So the definition in the bill has two parts, and it refers to the more stringent of the two parts. So the first part refers to the International Energy Conservation Code, and that sets a variety of requirements that are updated every 3 years. That's the same code that Maryland adopts the base code, not necessarily including appendices of. Then the second part of the definition is just a very short description of what this is. Having adequate panel capacity, dedicated electric panel space, electrical wire, etc., to fulfill end uses with electricity, specifically high efficiency appliances. So specifying indirectly something more like a heat pump than electric resistance heating. Excuse me. In terms of the relationship of this to the original bill, in the original bill, this had been a requirement in the event that a building were exempted from the general requirement that new construction fulfill heating and water heating and laundry requirements without the use of fossil fuels. So if there were some exceptional circumstance in a building such that they could not do that, they would instead have to have that end use be electric ready, so that in the future they could convert that end use to electric if the appropriate technology and equipment were available.
Okay, and that helps a lot. But if you didn't if you didn't explain this, or if I missed it, I apologize. But what exactly is meant by, or how like in layman's terms, can you explain what is the more stringent of in those two scenarios?
Sure. So there are appendices, so extra optional parts of the model energy code that have fairly detailed requirements. So like a little paragraph for each end use. For, let's say, in the residential code, there's a little paragraph specifying you need a branch circuit that has this amperage that can serve, this many kilowatts, and whether it needs to be dual pole or not, like these very specific electrical stipulations, so that it will fulfill the needs of a typical like dwelling units, water heating, space heating, what have you.
Okay.
So that's what's in that more stringent option.
Okay, probably more information than we needed, but I certainly appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, thank you. And Aaron, if I see Delegate, you have your hand up, but I just want to follow up on Delegate Lehman's question. So now under the bill, no requirement that for water heating and HVAC that it be electric. So someone could have a, gas furnace, but the building has to be electric ready.
Yes, buildings over, at or over 35,000 square feet that otherwise meet the requirements of a BEPS covered building would have to be
Right.
electric.
Right. So I guess unless you have a really big house, homes are basically not covered by this.
By the electric readiness requirements, yes, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah. Okay. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Move the amendments.
Second.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I still have one question and I apologize, but and then we'll get to your motion. Page, Aaron, this is for you. Page 4. This is what I understand to be the debiasing standards, which I cannot, to me, it's unintelligible what it means. So could you explain what that
Sure.
means? I guess it's B2.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So the model energy code currently and historically allows buildings that use different fuels to comply while using very different amounts of energy. So specifically, a home in a Maryland climate zone would be allowed to comply with the code using about 50% more energy if it had a gas furnace and water heater compared to a home that's otherwise similar that has an air source heat pump and a heat pump water heater. So that creates kind of a hidden imbalance in the code that encourages new construction decisions that have unintended consequences for long-term bills, utility costs for all ratepayers, et cetera. So the intention of this is to remove that bias or debias, as you say.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying is in the model energy code credit, because of Maryland's climate, a gas furnace would be able to emit 50% more energy than a heat pump and still be considered sort of equivalent for purposes of the energy code. Is that what you're saying?
I think so. So a home with that gas equipment is compared to a baseline, just in how the code works, how it evaluates whether a building complies. It would be compared to a baseline that also uses gas equipment, and the same for a home with a heat pump.
Okay.
So, in other words, heat pumps don't get credit for how much more efficient they are. They just have to hit a higher bar and be more energy efficient in a way that disincentivizes their installation.
Okay, so as part of the standards under this bill, MDE would have to make adjustments to take that into account.
Yes.
Okay.
Labor.
Okay, Delegate Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a really stupid question that I'm trying to figure out myself because it's tough. Does this bill include a district energy hookup if the district energy system already has an electric product?
Aaron?
As written, I don't believe it does. I believe at some point district energy providers had been looking at language to suggest as an amendment, but I don't see that here.
Okay, then my next question would be, NAIOP, I had a whole bunch of concerns about this bill originally. At this point in time, are their concerns being addressed?
Kristen, would you happen to know?
I do not know. I would have to defer to somebody maybe who's on the call.
Is there anyone from NAIOP on the call? Or representing them? Okay. So, yeah, Delegate Morgan, I guess we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Aaron, you were talking about heat pumps and this, that, and the other, and that's been substantial expense, but that sounds like they're more individual units, right? For single-family homes.
Yes, so
And this bill deals with 35,000 square feet.
the language in this section specifies covered buildings for the electric ready portion, but does
Yeah.
not specify covered buildings for the other portion.
So you're telling me I have to get a heat pump?
No. No, I'm saying, well, I'm not saying, the bill language is saying that the code would have to allow a building to comply at the same level of energy efficiency, regardless of what fuels are used in the building.
How about geothermal? How does that qualify in this situation?
Similarly, geothermal is very efficient, so probably geothermal would be compared to, instead of another heat pump, which is also pretty efficient, not as much as geothermal, it would be compared to the least efficient appliance available for that end use. So, for example, an 80% efficient furnace. So a geothermal system would get more credit toward compliance. So that home would need to do less on other energy efficiency measures to comply with the code.
So part of this bill deals with single-family homes, not just 35,000 square feet.
That is my interpretation of the language as written here.
Well, all right. Thank you. You answered my questions.
I think that might
Okay,
be a
thank you,
point
Doug.
to clarify too, because I think this, and I don't want to get ahead of this, but I believe the intent was for this to just be applying to the BEPS covered buildings. So I do think we need to get some clarification on other provisions and how they apply and how maybe they may need amendments.
Okay. Kristen, if we adopt the amendments, move the bill, is that something that you think we could get clarification on before it goes to the committee, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be the goal. I mean, of course, if it doesn't, if we don't get the answers in time, that's just where we're at. But I think for purposes of subcommittee, if the subcommittee wanted to move this along to keep moving forward, then we could work on, seeing if we need to clean up some of this language and then bring up and describe that during a full committee voting. We can do that.
Okay. Delegate Morgan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could I ask John Fiesta to describe district energy to a layman like me, please?
Sure. And thank you for the question, Delegate. I represent Vicinity Energy, the state's largest and perhaps only private district energy operator. District energy operates under the idea of a centralized boiler to provide hot water for heating and steam for heating purposes, or hot water or domestic hot water purposes. District energy can also be used for chilling as well, building chilling. So in regards to your previous question about whether the definition of electric ready includes district energy, it doesn't as it reads here. We do have language that we can offer. I believe that we have worked on this language with Mr. DeMarco and to expand the definition of electric ready to include district energy, so long as that district energy project or asset has a electric steam product, which is something that we've worked with MDE in the crafting of the BEPS regs over the last couple of years for them to recognize as a qualified energy source. So thank you very much for the question, Delegate, and we'd love to see that amendment added into this bill.
Okay, well, I'll just say Delegate Morgan, if you're interested.
I would have like I said, I would prefer, if we could, to have the amendment brought over by John to staff and they can see how it would work into the bill and its overall scheme, please.
Sure. Delegate Morgan, if you want to take the point on that, by all means.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I just want to be clear, though. I thought that this bill had to do with new construction and new construction only. And I think, am I right about that?
No, that's correct.
Because I think Delegate Otto has a different, I think he may have a different impression based on his questions and the answers he got, but this is just about new buildings, and that they have to be ready for this. They have to be, when they're built, they have to be ready to take this new, it would be electric usually in most cases, although it could be geothermal. They have to be ready to be able to take it. It has to be, they have to be built with that in mind. But existing buildings, even if it covers single family homes, which my reading of the bill says it doesn't, but Kristen's going to clarify that for us. And even with that, it would be new construction. I just want to be clear on that point, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
my understanding. And
If I may, just if you read the B1, Roman 2, in other places in the bill, it's specifying new covered buildings. Here, it just says buildings. And so as long as it would make sense to say new covered buildings here, I just want to, again, that this provision, I'm trying to understand it too. But I would think, and for this to be, if you want to limit this to buildings, that will be BEPS buildings, we should add language that says that new covered buildings of a certain fuel type may not be deemed compliant with the standards while achieving a lower energy efficiency on average than a new covered building of a different fuel type.
Okay,
Right.
because I just want to
Right.
be, because when I agreed to co-sponsor the bill, that's what I thought. So I want to make sure that my understanding is correct. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's an important clarification. I think that's right, that we're just talking about new covered buildings and okay. Okay, but we'll, work to clarify that. Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just respectfully moving the amendments once again.
Okay.
Second.
All right. Second, and Delegate Otto, any final question or
Yeah,
comment?
what's the definition of new covered buildings? That's any size?
It's the definition
I
that we
built
set
a
forth in the
doghouse
BEPS
or
bill.
something, that's a covered building.
We do have there is a definition in the bill that does limit it to the
The 35,000 square
yes,
feet?
it links it back to the BEPS covered buildings.
All right, that's not what I understood by the discussion here tonight with the.
Right, because I think that
advocates.
language, new covered building, is that phrase is not included in that second provision, which I'm thinking the
Maybe we
subcommittee
better
wants to
put it
do.
in there.
I that's what I think that was just more of an oversight and not a deliberate action.
All right,
Right.
well, I was
Okay,
here
we'll get that
all
clarified.
about these little heat pumps and all that, and they've been damn expensive this winter, so.
Not as expensive
Okay.
as my gas.
Yeah. So that can be corrected before and maybe any other I would say this here, from my understanding of what's being adopted is that these amendments plus any corrections when the word building is used to ensure that it's being consistent and indicating that these are new covered buildings throughout the bill's language.
Is there any clause for the expense to accommodate the electric accessibility or whatever?
Is there any funding to?
Or no, is there something to exempt them or something if they don't have the power available?
Well, it's electric ready, but Aaron, is there any exemption in here?
I'm sorry, it took me a moment to unmute. There's no exemption language, although I would point out that if a building has to meet the BEPS requirements for 2040 when it's first built, then it would be an extraordinary circumstance in which it would have any fuel burning equipment in it to begin with.
Okay.
Okay, Delegate Foley, go ahead.
Yeah, if I could, Mr. Chair, I
Sure.
just kind of wanted to, I think this is right. Delegate, to answer Delegate Otto, I think this is what we're talking about are new buildings, so they're not even constructed yet. So this would be when you construct a building that's covered, as we've made clear, which means 35,000 square feet, unless it's a hospital or manufacturing or all the exemptions we made, then that prospective building has to be ready to, in most cases, electric ready to accept this more efficient technology. That's really what it is.
Okay, thank you. Aaron, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to clarify, electric readiness requirements in the model code are written so they only apply where there's a combustion appliance installed. So it's not that you need this wiring in there kind of irrespective of what fuel you're using. If you're already using electric equipment, you don't need to have like redundant or additional wiring.
Okay. All right, we have a motion and it's been seconded for the amendments. All those in favor of the amendment say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Bill as amended.
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Okay, bill as amended is before us. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
No.
Okay, duly noted. Okay, that is, Kristen, are we done for the evening?
We
I
are
think
done
that-
for, yep, for the evening, we are done.
Okay, all right, thank you, everyone. And just as I said at the outset, we are going to be meeting probably on Friday. Hopefully we could finalize SB 253. And also we're going to discuss the EPR bill. So just a heads up about that. Okay, well, thank you, everyone.